time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet Podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly and I'm your host, and I am not joined by my co-host this week. Matt Freeman is out this week. I think he's in Disneyland with his family, so hope you guys are having fun. But I am joined by podcast regular Adrian Torres. Adrian, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. And I'm not a last minute fill-in or anything.
No.
I was always going to be on this one, so it's not like you were scrambling and like, Matt's abandoned me, I need help.
No, we would never do that. No, but Adrian was brought in here because just in time for Halloween being over, we wanted to have a podcast where we talk about some horror movies. We thought we would do a continuing Deconstructing series. We would talk about the director Wes Craven, and I know you are a big horror buff, Adrian. So, you'd be perfect to bring on here and talk about this director.
Well, I try to do what I can by watching not only as many movies as I can, but as many bad movies, and invariably that means that it dips into the horror well more often than not.
And it dips into some of Craven's filmography as well. we'll get to that.
Yes. Sadly, I will confess up front that I did put in a reservation to rent Music from the Heart from my library, and I was number one in the queue, but it has still not arrived, so I did not get to watch the one Wes Craven movie that is not horror related at all.
Bummer. I guess we'll just not have to talk about that movie and pretend like it doesn't exist.
That'll be a separate episode. We'll come back for that one and cause people great pain. Maybe if I do get to see it and it's terrible enough, we can have that be for something else.
Ooh, I like that idea. But anyway, before we dive into Mr. Craven and his films, we wanted to go over some news because it's been a few weeks since we've done any news. Actually, there's not too much happening in the world of film news right now. I think everyone's gearing up for Oscar season and fall and winter movies, so we're not getting too many releases because no one wants to talk about the stuff that's coming 6-12 months from now. They want to be focusing on those films, but we do have a little bit to talk about. First, Adrian, I want to talk to you personally because I know this is very important to you. The Wet Hot American Summer, 10 years later?
Yes.
Something, has a new cast member. This was just announced today. This is breaking 12 hours ago news. Jai Courtney has joined the cast of Wet Hot American Summer. As
unknown and up-and-coming talent, Jai
Courtney. For the people that don't know, there's a film website, Birth Movies Death, that both Adrian and I frequent, that is kind of creepily obsessed with Jai Courtney. We started. I don't know who actually started the hashtag.
It was Scott Wampler.
Was it? Did he start it?
Yeah, he started it around the time that they did the Photoshop contest last year. Yeah. They had a Photoshop contest to put together basically the worst poster of all time, and one of the things that had to be in there was Jai Courtney. And they had an overwhelming number of people who ended up sending in submissions for different posters. And
that was amazing.
They basically said that we were hashtag Jai Blessed. So hashtag Jai Bless is kind of a greeting that you give to other commenters on the website, as well as people that you might meet throughout Twitter and other social circles. If you go onto Twitter at basically any time, you can search for hashtag Jai Bless, and you will probably come across at least, 50 to a couple hundred entries from the last couple hours. On a day like today, that's blowing up and it's all over the place.
Yeah. So I like, we joke about Jai Courtney a lot. I'm excited about this because I think he's just weird enough to fit into the weirdness of this perfectly. I think he's playing romantic interest of
Amy Fuller.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think that the idea of that just sounds so amazing. I love Wet Hot American Summer. I loved the Netflix show last year, and I am very much looking forward to this. And this news just turns that up to 11.
Well, all the people who are involved in the show are great at finding certain people who are willing to make fun of themselves that you might not normally think were willing to take that jump. Of course, when they did, potential spoilers or potential excitement for people who haven't seen Wet Hot American Summer, the first day of camp, which was the continuation series that Netflix did recently, where they had Chris Pine play a role in the film, and he very much was making fun of himself and the movie star, kind of rock star type character, but he had lots of fun with it. Bradley Cooper, of course, is in it because he was in the original movie and became friends with lots of the people who were in the movie, and David Wayne, Michael Ian Black, and Michael Showalter had a little comedy troupe that was called Stella, and they made really weird short films. And he got together with them before he broke it big, and was in some of their videos doing really, really weird stuff. But it was before he became big, and lots of people view Bradley Cooper as not really making fun of himself a lot. But if you go back and you watch this, you can see that he was willing to do it at an early point. And they're able to find these actors that, while they might be kind of bland seeming or pretty in a movie way, to come out of their shell and really go over the top in a way that most people aren't willing to. So I think Jai Courtney is going to have a lot of fun with it and garner more fans than he would normally have, being in the movies he normally is.
Completely agree. Absolutely the best part of Suicide Squad. So happy to see him do anything that allows him to be ridiculous.
Yes.
All right, next up, Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, Dunkirk, the World War II film, is just like Interstellar, going to be shown in 35 and 70 millimeter film a couple days early before its national release. I bring this up only because I love film and want to support the projection on film over digital. And as much as I dislike a lot of Christopher Nolan's work, I like that he has the clout to still kind of push this. I want to show this on film, and I'm going to get to. So I definitely will be checking this movie out in 70 millimeter. I just got to find a place in Dallas to do it.
Yeah, I will say what I always tell people in general, and that's if you have a chance to go to see a rep screening of a movie anywhere that's actually on film, 35 millimeter film, go see it, go do it. If you live in a town that has an Alamo Draft House, they always have a ton of 35 millimeter showings. They have probably at least 4 to 5 a month, at least. If you're in a bigger city, if you're in one of the ones that's in Texas, the one that just opened in Brooklyn, they're going to show even more, basically, because I know that the Brooklyn one has a room that's specifically set up just to have rep screenings of 35 millimeter prints, and they're actually developing different showcases that they're going to have. I know that they've got one that's going to be blaxploitation cinema. They've got one that's going to be general 70s exploitation sleaze, but it's to get these movies that are shown on 35 millimeter just to show them in pristine quality. They'll also show older movies in 35 millimeter just because of that tactile feeling that you get by seeing something projected on celluloid is completely different from just getting it in the digital experience. Secondly, if you are somebody who is in a city that did the Hateful Eight in 70 millimeter, the theater did not just get rid of that projector, so they will have it set up
It's very
and
expensive.
ready to go. It's totally expensive, and they're very, very heavy things. So they will probably definitely be showing Dunkirk. So if you got a chance to go to that special experience and see Hateful Eight in theater, remember that theater, because you're definitely going to be able to see Dunkirk there.
Or in my case, don't remember that theater, because I was one of those theaters that showed it on 70 millimeter on a screen that was not made for it, and it was a tiny little screen that was cut off on the top and bottom and just looked terrible and so disappointing. So I mean, that's the other thing about film, is that you need to make sure there's a projectionist that knows what they're doing, and most of them don't these days. But I did see Interstellar in 35 at an Alamo Drafthouse, and as much as I do not like that movie, that is the way to see it. It was beautiful, and I have to imagine that Dunkirk will be the same way. All right, the last thing I want to talk about briefly, this is, I guess, in the world of online news, kind of old, because it happened last week, but Bryan Fuller has officially left as showrunner for the new Star Trek series, Star Trek Discovery. I think the chief creative quote-unquote person is now Akiva Goldsman, which, if any of you out there follow the career of Akiva Goldsman, this is really bad news.
For those who don't know, he wrote and directed A Winter's Tale with now I'm gonna blank on his name. Why am I doing this? Colin Farrell and Russell Crowe, and it was a passion project of his, and the movie is terrible.
So bad.
And when he executive produced it, he wrote it himself, he directed it himself, he used all his clout to get it done, and it was terrible. And he is also famously the writer of Batman and Robin. So regardless of what type of shine you try to put on that movie, it's also a bad film. The name I didn't realize was still connected to this project, but no one brought up, but in the press release he was still there, and kind of made me go, ooh, I didn't know that he was still involved, was Kurtzman.
Yeah.
Who I know that Orsi famously got booted off of everything that was Star Trek, but I didn't realize that Kurtzman was still involved. And
but I don't know how much.
Well, he was kind of he was a step below where Bryan Fuller was, but he still had that kind of overseeing power and was one of the big producers who was on it. So they're still letting him have his fingers in the pie, which, with everything that he's been involved with, it isn't great. So hopefully it's just a name in only thing, like he has to get points on the back end or something like that. If that's the case, I'm fine. But if he's whispering in anybody's ear, he and Goldsman together aren't exactly the best power couple I want.
No. Yeah, it's especially disappointing given, everything Bryan Fuller had said about what he wanted for the series and how encouraging it was and how right in line with what Star Trek is. So it's kind of a double blow. You lose a guy who really understands what Star Trek is and seems like he's going to take this series in a new direction, but one that fully embraces the history of Star Trek. And now it's just in the hands of people who don't know what they're doing. On the other side, the show is fairly far along into development, and the things, at least for this first season, that Fuller wanted to do are probably relatively set in stone. So there's a chance that we'll still get something good and still true to the vision that Fuller had. But I don't know about you. I was already annoyed because this in the United States, this is showing on CBS's new streaming service that you have to pay extra for. So I was annoyed that I would have to pay for another service just to see the show, and this kind of cements it for me as I'm not gonna pay for CBS All Access or whatever it's called. I'll wait until the show gets put on something else. I don't want to pay for this, especially now. So kind of a bummer.
Yeah, you just wait 6 to 9 months, and then it'll be on Netflix probably.
Yeah, well, especially since I think it's on Netflix in Canada, and other countries around the world. It's really just in U.S. and I think a few other countries that CBS is keeping it tight at release on their streaming platform.
Yeah.
We should have I want to have a whole podcast about these. I feel like these streaming platform services have gotten out of control. And
well, the one thing that you can feel good about is even though he's technically off the project because this was Bryan Fuller's baby, there's always a chance that it gets canceled after the first season.
There you go. There's the silver lining. But I really like the first Star Trek movie of the reboots. And Star Trek Beyond I enjoyed very much too. But I really do think the Star Trek series is better suited for television. So I want there to be a good Star Trek TV show out there. And I was hoping this was it. And if this doesn't end up being it, I hope it's something else. I don't know. It's just disappointing.
There's always a chance. So we'll just stay positive.
You never know. All right, that's it for news this week. And now we'll move into our main event. We'll deconstruct Wes Craven. This is, Adrian, this is interesting because we've done, I think, 5 of these now, but this is kind of the first one that we've done for a director that has died. So we are going through their filmography, and it is their complete filmography. They're not going to make any more movies. So for me, it feels like there's a little bit of an added amount of pressure there to give this guy full coverage. But at the same time, Wes Craven directed a lot of movies, 29 movie credits. We did not get to watch all these movies before this podcast. We're not going to talk about every single one of these movies. It's way too long for an hour and a half podcast. But we are going to jump through his major films, movies that probably everyone listening has heard of, and talk about them and try to find out, who Wes Craven was overall as a director and what made him unique and special. So before we start going movie by movie, what is your overall opinion on Wes Craven and his filmography?
He is a schlockmeister, and I mean that in the most glowing, wonderful way. Because when he hits his highs, the films are still tremendously schlocky. And I've discussed this with you and many other people over the last week and a half that I've been going through all these movies. Is he always has kind of an inherent schlocky quality to his films, and that's not necessarily bad because he embraces it. And as ridiculous as many of his movies are, you're still enveloped and you're still invested in what's going on. And he's still able to get under your skin. And you might be laughing one moment because of something being ridiculous and then stop and catch your breath the next second because he's pulled out something that genuinely terrifies you. And that's a very big balancing act. And it's why over the course of his entire career, he has such tremendous highs and such deep lows. But overall, you could definitely tell a Wes Craven movie. And when he starts, his first couple movies, you can tell that he's kind of getting his feet wet in what he wants to do. But you can definitely tell when he hits his stride and the signature little beats that he has in all of his movies. And you can tell a couple minutes into what is a Wes Craven film because it has a very distinct feel to it. And I know we'll get into this more as we move through the movies, but strangely enough, it's the Scream series that feels the most kind of apart from everything else that he made. And that's what he's most known for nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I agree with you. He's so his films get lumped into the slasher horror, the Halloweens and the Friday the 13th. I don't think that's fair. I think he's doing something very different with all his movies, and I mean they are very horror centric, but they're very different kinds of movie. A Nightmare on Elm Street is not a movie like Halloween at all. It is completely apart from that. It is completely different. It is trying to do different things. And I think Schlockmaster is a perfect word. And I don't know. I don't love all of these movies, but there's parts in each of them that I absolutely love. And I think that's remarkable. I love his characters. I love I know the Scream series is not most representative by him, but I love like you can tell, at least in Scream, in the first one, how he's exploring what these type of films, what the effect they have and what they do and what they're saying. And I think that's fascinating. Why don't we...
If you want to put it in a nicer term, I know that Schlockmeister might turn some people off. It's fantastic, and if you're as dorky as we are when it comes to movies and love them as much as we do, you know exactly what we're saying. But if you're not as familiar, and when you hear schlock, it kind of turns you away. The nicest thing that you can say about him is that he's an entertainer. Outside of his first 2 to 3 movies, you get the sense that he wants to give you an entertaining time. He wants to have you go on an experience. He wants you to enjoy going out to the movies and watching his films. He wants you to have an adventure, and that's completely noble. And while he's not trying to make high art at all, there's not a lot of directors who just want you to have a good time. And he wants you to have a great time, and he wants to try to maybe rattle your bones if he gets a chance to do that. And you don't have lots of directors who try to do that.
Absolutely. And I think it's very fitting that he came from porn. He was a pornography director for a few years before he transitioned into his first film. And you can kind of see that in exactly what you're talking about, and that he's going for entertainment, and he's shifted exactly what kinds of entertainment he's going to show you, at least kind of. In his first few movies, not so much, but
well, we'll definitely bring that up with the second movie. I don't know the history exactly of the first one, so maybe you'll know it better than I do.
Let's just jump right into it. Let's jump into Last House on the Left. Is Wes Craven's first feature film. Was released in 1972. This movie is pretty infamous for its absolutely brutal sexual assaults and a very like it's you would call this a horror movie, but it's like it's kind of, I mean, it's not like it definitely not fits into the slasher type films. It's
just ground about exploitation.
Yeah. God, it's this movie. I don't know how I feel about this movie, because like I've seen this before, but this is the first time I watched it really and sat down and thought about it a lot. And it is a movie that's pretty infamous for its brutality, but it kind of lulls you into it a little bit, because the tone of this is so weird. Because like you have multiple groups of characters that seem like you have this group of murderers, but they're treated as kind of like these bumbling idiots that don't really know what they're doing, kind of like Three Stooges-esque physical comedy sometimes, with these terrible human beings, and he intercuts that with this brutality and constantly like back and forth between the two, and it's just so jarring. And I know it's exploitation, and that's kind of where that stuff shines, but like I don't know, man. Like I didn't know how to feel watching this movie.
I think that's part of what he wants, or maybe is trying to tap into, because you can tell that he's got basically an erector set that he wants to play with, and he wants to see what he can try to do. He's very much feeling out the type of movie that he wants to make, and with it being in 1972, the world of cinema was changing. He had lots of counterculture elements. The exploitation genre was huge and booming at that time. And it feels like a movie that's trying to play to a certain crowd of the exploitation subset, as well as feeding into the fear of drug culture. For like Midwestern moms and stuff who are like, oh, drugs are bad, you don't want to do it. They if they happen to see this movie, they'd be like, oh, that's a sterling indictment right there. So these kids shouldn't be doing drugs at all. I was right. But I mean, it's not geared towards them, because the violence that they're trying to get across at the time was definitely shocking to audiences, because it didn't fit into the normal horror type of film because it's not set up the way horrors were at that time. And I think it does come from, as you mentioned, his background as a porn director, because there's very much scenes that kind of feel like that CD's
Oh yeah.
70s sleaze to it, with actors who weren't really experienced and look like they're forgetting lines, but are knowing the direction that they had in their mind of where they're supposed to get the scene to. So they're fumbling with it, and then in the editing room, it's like, well, we couldn't really use most of the scene, so let's just jump to what we needed to use.
Yeah, and it's a movie that very much feels like that because it feels like there are giant scenes missing. There's once the Mary is shot and left for dead, the movie kind of jumps very quickly to these people now being in the house of coincidentally where her parents live, but there's not a lot of setup to now they're in this house and they've been invited in and now they get to stay. Like, it just kind of jumps there, and it does feel like, hey, this footage we just shot, this filler stuff that would have explained this, was just not usable. And it has that. I mean, I think the movie was made for $70,000 or something like that, so yeah. It has that very low budget feel. And I do like it very much, even with the low budget, it very much feels like a first directorial venture, because it does feel like Craven's still learning and still trying to figure out what he wants to do. And I think some of the jarring tone stuff is intentional, but I think some of that is just he's just trying to figure out how to do this and how to create this kind of stuff. The entire end of the film where Mary's parents are basically seeking revenge on these rapists and murderers, has a very like Home Alone feel to it. Like, yeah. you have the dad like setting up booby traps, which are almost completely ineffective. Like they don't work at all. But like it just like, and the tone is like the type of music that's playing is kind of like that Home Alone-y type feel, where it's like mischievous and but it doesn't like. But these are people that 20 minutes ago we saw like brutally murder and rape and do all these terrible things. It's such a weird movie, and I don't think I can call it good. Like I don't. It's not that it's bad. I just don't think I can't call this a good film.
I think it's very. It fits into a box of films that were notorious and built up years and years ago because of the majority of films that were being made at the time, and this being apart from them so much and being made in a different style, not necessarily good style, but not in a style that people were used to, that it garnered such a big I guess history of its own, a kind of a folklore legend about it. Because if you look at any of the cover art that they have for the film, they don't really show pictures of anybody who are in it, but it has a very menacing and dark cover that feeds into the normal horror aspects that you think of that aren't really in there. And so as we're judging it today in 2016, it doesn't have that same edge or luster that it did originally at that time. And then because of its history of it being a movie that was rated X and then cut down to an R, but still caused lots of problems with people who were viewing it. And I believe it ended up for a period of time on the famous Video Nasties list of movies that were banned in many different countries. And not all of those are horribly over the top and gross, but they may have featured rape and murdering to a degree that didn't really conform with the majority of motion pictures that were out there. So it was put on this different pedestal. And unfortunately, because of movies now, you end up seeing these in a different light. And because of the fact that it's not a good movie, it's disappointing to say that. But there's plenty of other films that try to accomplish the same things with more skilled directors. Yeah. And had, I know it sounds bad to say, but had a more tasteful touch to it. Whereas as this movie wanted to be kind of a punch in the face and to shock people, and then you get word of mouth that way, and you get people to go and see it, and then you're able to turn a profit, of course, and that helps you be able to make a movie in the future.
Yeah, I mean that's the entire exploitation genre. I mean that's what it's for. Did you? And this is going to be a question I'm going to ask a lot throughout this podcast. Did you see the remake? Because
yes, yeah.
What did you think of that? Because I think for every reason why I don't think this is a good movie, I think the opposite reason for why the remake was not a very good movie.
It's the remake is better, but only by a little bit.
Well, it's like you take something like this, which is so clearly an exploitation film, and you dress it up and fancy it up into like a typical horror film, and I think it like. I think it's when you said you're doing an exploitation film, there's a certain level of, okay, I'm accepting of this terrible stuff you're showing on screen just meant to shock me. But if you put it in like a self-serious, like traditional horror film, which this remake was, it just makes everything like, I don't know, it just doesn't work. Like, I'm just not okay with it anymore. Like,
no, it definitely doesn't really work, but the what's on display and what's being done isn't that great, as in like the story that they're trying to tell and moving from point to point to point. But a couple of the actors that are in the movie are elevating the material,
Yeah.
And anytime you put Garrett Dillahunt in something, he's always going to be swinging for the fences, and while it's not a big flashy performance, he's still good with it. And Tony Goldwyn, who spent the majority of his career being giant scumbags and pieces of crap, is entertaining as the dad. And he and Monica Potter, them teaming up together later in the film, was a lot better than in the original film. And
yeah,
but it doesn't elevate it to the stratosphere so that everything's forgivable, because the story's still really weak. There's not really a lot of people to root for until you get to the mom and dad, and the mom and dad are doing horribly, horribly heinous things that at points are far worse than other people in the movie, that you can't really 100% be like, oh yeah, we're totally for them. I mean, it is that revenge fantasy, so you do have people who buy into that, and it's like, no, they had to do it, and it's like, well, I'm not sure if you had to do the microwave scene.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And I think, I think we're about ready to move on from this film, because I don't know if there's anything else to say. I don't think there's no deeper perspective I think you can look into this movie, because it was,
Nope.
it's violence porn. That's what it is. It's not saying anything on any kind of deeper level. So let's jump ahead 5 years, and let's talk about The Hills Have Eyes, which is another, if you know horror movies, you've probably seen this movie and its sequels and remakes. Adrian, what did you think of The Hills Have Eyes?
I didn't like it. I mean, simply put, and it's not a great film. It's got some interesting moments, but again, it's trying to push that envelope and have things be in your face. I mean, when God, I can't even remember which feral character it is, but when the guy is ransacking the trailer and he reaches into the cage and he kills, was it a bird or what is it, a rat?
It was a bird. It was a bird.
Yeah, I thought it was a bird, but the way they have it in his hand, it kind of has like a mouse's head that's sticking out when he just squashes it and has the really watery blood that's dribbling down his hand, and it's like, okay, is this to show that he's crazy? I mean, I understand that, but I don't know why we need it. And the movie feels like it wants to push that envelope, like it wants to be in your face. But then there's so much of the movie is dead space and quiet moments and what feels like inside jokes that people just left in the film.
Well, that's I mean, that's a good point, because I don't feel like any of the characters are characters. Like on either side, the crazy people in the hills or our cast of heroes, like you really don't learn much about any of them. And even near the end of the movie, I was still trying to be like, okay, so he's married to her, but that was her father, and that's their kid, or is it cousin, or like I don't think any of them.
One of them is named Bobby, and that's all you really know. He's the only person whose name they say a whole bunch of times.
Right, like I'm sitting here looking at IMDb and looking at these list of names, and you're right. I mean, the only one that I knew was Big Bob.
Yeah.
And then Bobby was the little kid, and that's it.
They're not even heroes, though. They're not even heroes. The hero of the movie is Beast, which is a dog. The dog is the hero of the movie because the dog kills half of the people who are bad who die in the movie.
And the dog is smart, too. The dog is so great. I was thinking, like, watching this film, one of the things about Fantastic Fest, for those listening, is that it's pretty infamous for its dog killings in films appearing on there. And when the dog Beauty dies at the very beginning, I'm like, oh, this fit perfectly in Fantastic Fest. And then when you think that Beast is going to be killed again, but no, Beast is a badass.
Beast he's fantastic, and your other main character, who is basically called Mustache because I forget his name, but he basically looks like if you took Howard from The Big Bang Theory and gave him a 70s porn mustache. That's what the guy looked like to me the whole time, and I'm like, I can't take you seriously because of this.
Yeah.
And then they try to have him be the hero, and it's like, nope, I'm still not gonna do it. But yeah, there's the history of this movie and what inspired it. You see what they're going for, but it lessens the impact of this movie. Wes Craven was a big fan at the time of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and when he made this film, he actually got one of the producers of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they've got a scene that shows the Farrell family clan, their cave dwelling. There's a whole bunch of objects that are strewn about, and they're actually props from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And then tying into those early porn days of Wes Craven, he actually borrowed a friend of his who was a pornographer at the time. He borrowed his cameras to shoot this movie to help cut down on costs. And you can see that influence of them wanting to try to make something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's all over the place. And we spend all this time with the Farrell clan, and maybe back in the 70s they were more frightening or odd, but they just come off as kind of comical nowadays.
Yeah. God, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a better film in every way.
Yes.
And Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a movie that was not a very expensive film either, but this looks like cheap and like the smart thing that I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre did was you kind of fully understood the world that this family lived in, and you can tell they kind of tried to do that in this movie, by cutting back to scenes of them all talking, but it comes off as it's not even schlocky. It's just kind of ridiculous, and like it. I mean, like none of these characters it seems fearsome at all. Like especially by having them defeated by a dog. I mean, I think that's great, but. And again, we've got this scene where characters are suddenly trying to make booby traps. Like if anything, there's through line in Wes Craven's career at this point is that he likes having his characters construct quick booby traps, and you'll see that again in Nightmare on Elm Street. But
not just in Nightmare on Elm Street, but in like 90% of the movies going forward, there's people who are trying to build contraptions like mini MacGyvers or booby traps here or there,
and they never work.
No.
They never work.
They usually backfire and hurt the person that created them.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it confuses me. I mean, this is a movie that had a sequel. I think it had another sequel after that. And then I know they rebooted it, and the reboot got a sequel. And I don't I don't understand why. Like there's
Well,
nothing iconic about this film to me.
no, but it again, going back to um, the first movie, Last House on the Left, they turned a profit. This movie was made for not a ton, but it made millions upon millions of dollars. Like it made back a big profit, and so they wanted to make a sequel, and they kind of strong armed Wes Craven into doing it. And The Hills Have Eyes Part 2 is about 75% footage that was left over from the first movie, and they let him do basically minimal reshoots and said, okay, you have to build a story from what you have. And it's got like a 0 or 0.5 on Rotten Tomatoes. Wes Craven years later came out and completely disowned the movie, but that's why they put it out, really. But you're not able to get a lot out of a series where the actors were auditioned on the basis of how well they were able to cry on command. The part of Ruby, the girl who went out for it, I believe it was her character or it was one of the sisters, that when they were auditioning for the part, they basically had to race other girls. And it was who was able to run this distance the fastest was the person who got the part. So when you're asking actors to run places and cry, and that's all that's really being asked of them, you can't expect it to be a great film. But
No.
as with lots of these exploitation films or horror movies that were made at the time, it launched the careers of a couple people. The guy who played Pluto, Michael Berryman, I believe, just went on to and still has a long career and be a movie in horror films for years and years and years. If anybody out there has seen Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, there's a scene when they're on, I don't remember if it's like the Starfleet base or whatever, but when they're dealing with the alien ship that first comes in, one of the helmsmen who's sitting there has kind of a weird shaped head, and that's Michael Berryman. That's his look that he has. He's very noticeable. But then at the same time, the movie also had Dee Wallace, who goes on to have a huge film career. The majority of people who are out there are going to know her as the mom from E.T. And so you have these people who have to start and have really crappy beginnings to go and have giant careers.
Yeah, and I guess there's something about that. I mean, it's been copied so many times. The family on a vacation gets stranded somewhere, and crazy locals like that's a formula that's been done again and again. So there's something to it that I guess it interested people enough. There's some level of fear there, base level of fear there that everyone has that interests people enough that they want to check that out. But
it's Suburbans versus Hicks, basically. That's the fear, is that you've got somebody who's decently well-to-do, middle class, going on some type of vacation, doesn't really care about people who are below their station, and usually they do something very small, or just in this movie, they just exist. And so the people who are backwoods or Hicks or inbred or whatever the trope is of that movie instinctually goes, oh, we fucking hate you and need to kill you.
Well, I mean, they're hungry.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As they say with the baby, prime sirloin meat. Or sorry, prime loin meat.
All right, let's keep on moving, and we're gonna jump another great distance. We're gonna jump 7 years to 1984, and the movie that before Scream, Craven was best known for, A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I think this is the first movie that I can say is a good film. It's not. I don't think it's my favorite in the series. I don't think it's like a perfect movie, but I love the concept behind this movie, and I think we can see 12 years from his start in the industry, Craven has really gotten a handle on exactly what he wants to do and how he wants to do it, and I think that shows in this film a lot. and I really, really like it. What do you think about Nightmare on Elm Street?
I like it as well. I got to back on the 15th of October. I did the Never Sleep Again marathon that they had at the Kansas City Alamo Draft House, where they showed all 7 movies back to back to back to back to back. So it was an amazing experience. Just as first of all as an endurance test, but then also at the same time to see the course that these films go through, and being able to see Nightmare on Elm Street up on a big screen is a fantastic experience, because there's still so many effects that really tug at you and get you. And for a movie that was made in 1984, that's a big thing to say. Horror movies over time, because of the practical effects that they did in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, start to show their age over time. And while there are instances of that in Nightmare on Elm Street, you still are in awe of several scenes. When they have the ceiling board kind of become latex for a moment,
that was so good.
It's still great. It's still great to the day. Just him pushing in with the face, and then going back, them cutting to her in bed, and then cutting back to the ceiling and her knocking on it. It's just a great transition that speaks to good editing, that you lose yourself in the scene. When
I love
I'm blanking on her name. The bedroom kill, not the Johnny Depp one. But when she's being pulled onto the ceiling and her boyfriend's over in the corner, still fantastic.
Oh yeah, that's really great. The one I love is the bathtub stuff. That still like till this day creeps me out. And I remember the first time I saw this movie, like I was afraid of the bathtub for a while, because like not only is the hand reaching out of the water scary, but like the whole part when like she's pulled under and like you see the little hole where the bathtub is, but there's this mass expanse of water surrounding her. I mean, that's legitimately terrifying, and I've had nightmares just like that. And it's so well done. Like it's so good. And that's why I think like this idea, this taking dreams and using it in this movie is such a good idea. And I really think it's why there have been so many sequels to this movie, because it's such a good base idea, and it's executed so well here. I really love this movie.
Well, and Freddy himself, the most effective scenes that he has in the movie is when he's shown from a distance and he's shrouded in shadow, that he takes on this kind of ethereal shape, and he's very much in that dream world, that dreamlike quality, that thing that you can't fully grasp, and the fact that you can't see him, but you can feel his presence, and you can feel the menace and dread that exists around it. And it speaks a lot to the teenage sensibilities of parents being distrustful, even if you're actually in a bad situation. The parents, being like, "Oh, you're just a teenager. It's just a phase. These things aren't real. You need to grow up." Really gets to the heart of how isolated everybody is in this movie.
But that's one of my only complaints with the movie is this level of distrust, and I understand it's thematically there, and I do think this is one of the first movies where Wes Craven is trying to definitively say something in his film. But I think it's funny how little they believe Nancy, especially after she goes to the Sleep Institute, wakes up with Freddy's hat, and they're still like, "No, she's got to be making this up. Just send her home. Send her home." I'm like, "Come on."
Well, the readings are going off the chart, and they're like,
"Did she smuggle the hat in with her?" Like,
probably. I mean, they're teenagers. They're all on drugs. When they're looking at the machine and everything, they're like, "Oh, that's normal. But this is normal too." Well, that's a little bit high, but that's still normal. And they're watching her scream, and they're like, "Ah, no, we'll still give it another second. We shouldn't check on her yet." And the needle's just going all over the place. And they're like, "No, let's get a little bit more readings. Just tell. She could be faking it. We don't know."
It's so good, and you're right. There's this undercurrent of this parent teenager divide everywhere in this movie. I mean, like it would have been very easy to just make a movie about how your dreams can kill you, but Freddy's backstory ties into the parents doing this terrible thing to him because they wanted justice to be served. But I also love the part where, like, all she needs to do is, if Johnny Depp wouldn't have died if her parents had just given the phone, or his parents just given him the phone when she called. But there's this super level of distrust. Like, at this point, she's got bars on her window. She's trapped in her house. And they, like, so much mistrust between the family and the kids. That's why Johnny Depp dies. Yeah. But it really is interesting what he's exploring here.
Yeah, well, he came out and said that he was basing lots of the imagery on nightmares that he'd had, and was trying to make them real. And so that, bringing that to the forefront, that's going to give you a leg up, because you're working from something that bothered you, and if you're able to tap into what scares you, it makes it a lot easier for you to scare other people. But this is one of the first times where he's able to get right that undercurrent of offbeat humor to bring a little bit of levity to the proceedings. So it's not just dread the whole time. You have people who are able to make jokes and have banter off of one another to bring some scenes down. So you do have a moment to catch your breath, and it's a really strong ebb and flow.
And Freddy himself is goofy, and it doesn't. I don't think it hurts the film at all. I think it kind of adds to the creepiness that he's this guy that he's really just fucking with them through the majority of the movie. I mean, when he wants to kill someone, he can kill them. So he's really just messing with her throughout the entirety of the movie, and it's weird and it's unsettling, and I just, as a person who had nightmares all the time growing up, like, this movie just spoke to me, and the rest of the series did too.
But he's the interesting dichotomy that exists in the movie, but deepening the divide between the teenagers and the parents is, like, for instance, just how fucking evil he is when Freddy kills the mom, just compared to everyone else, and because of where he is at the time in the movie, is he just fucking goes after her. He's set on fire. He's goes straight up to the room, and he's like, fuck it, I'm going to take this bitch out with me. On fire, runs up the stairs, smothering and stabbing her. And then they have that creepy visual of the burned corpse of the mom going into the light and smoke into the bed.
Oh, I loved that.
And then the top of the bed just appearing as the bed sheet again. But he's so angry and evil in that moment, compared to when he's killing most of the other kids. He's kind of playing with them for a period of time. He doesn't just go up and he's like, okay, I'm going to set you on fire and stab you a bunch and then we're done. Even when he's killing Glenn, and sucking him into the bed and vomiting it up, it's still a playful manner. And it just has a different brutality when he goes after Nancy's mom.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think once Freddy's pulled out of the dream world, he does kind of fundamentally change as a character, which kind of makes sense because it's literally your dream coming to life. But so why were you able to find out? I mean, Wes Craven, he was talked into the Hills Have Eyes Part 2. We'll know he's obsessed with the Scream series, but he did this movie and then he left, and there were 4 sequels. I think at least one reboot, and then the crossover movies. Like he was not involved in any of the stuff.
He actually was.
Or was he?
Yeah. For Dream Warriors, he helped write the script.
Oh yeah, you're right. I remember that.
So he did play a big part of.
You mean the best one?
Yeah. Well, that was I've always been a fan of Dream Warriors just because it's such a great movie. It's so fun. It's so ridiculous. It starts to play into the more comedic side of Freddy when he's becoming an icon. The special effects are still to this day really, really gnarly and out there. The human puppet scene is still works
Yeah.
on the big screen. It looks so good.
Well,
And it just has lots of fun.
I think it's starting to do what you'll see him do again in New Nightmare years later. Like, I don't think he's interested in just doing basic sequels. I think he wants to take the idea and explore it further. And Dream Warriors takes the idea and kind of says, okay, we've established that this is the world we live in, that he can attack you in your dreams and kill you. What do we do with this, and what do we do interesting with it? And in Dream Warriors, he does something new and interesting, and then in New Nightmare, he kind of goes completely meta and crazy with it, in a really cool way. But we'll get there.
Yeah, I'm totally good to jump into New Nightmare now. But all I was going to say is, watching all these movies back to back to back, I have a newfound and great appreciation for the second one,
Really?
Freddys Revenge. It's really, really fun. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's got subtext that's really just text, and has so much going on with the main character and the actors giving a fun performance. Grady, who is the jock, who becomes a sidekick, who's not like any of the other jock characters in any movies, because he's basically a giant goofball himself. And half the scenes they have him in, he's cracking wise. and there's an entire protracted scene in the lunchroom where he's saying stuff while his mouth is just constantly stuffed with food the whole time. And when he has kind of when his friend says that the main character says he doesn't want him around anymore, his face is just stuffed with so much food. And he's like, fine, if you don't want me around, then I'm not going to be here. And you're just like, I have no idea why this is happening. The movie is campy throughout and has some great kills. It's a completely different beast than all the other movies, save for something like New Nightmare that's specifically trying to go off in a different direction. So it's one of my favorites. I really liked number 2. Wes Craven, sadly not involved in any way in that.
All right, so let's move into, before we jump to New Nightmare, I want to quickly touch on middle phase Wes Craven, which is his 1, 2, 3 of Serpent and the Rainbow, Shocker, and People Under the Stairs. This is kind of, I think, Craven finally reached success and finally got to do kind of whatever he wanted to, and he spits out these 3 movies. And unfortunately, I've never seen Serpent and the Rainbow. I saw Shocker a long time ago, but I rewatched People Under the Stairs, and it's still one of my favorite of his films. This is such an interesting phase of his career, though. I mean, just from the 2 of the 3 films I've seen, it really feels like he's found his rhythm, and he knows exactly what he wants to do, and he's fully embracing his own personal weirdness. If you want to go through Serpent and the Rainbow really quickly, what your opinion on it, since I've never seen it?
Well, these movies are kind of the holy trifecta that I think for Wes Craven. It is Wes Craven at his most Craveniest, if you want to say. Well, like you said, he had the clout from having several successful films and was able to do whatever he wanted, and he just goes hog wild with these movies. And these are the cream of the crop when it comes to the Schlockmaster title, because they are chintzy, they are cheesy, they are scary, they are hilarious, they're fantastic, they're everything that you can think of, and they work. They tie you in and they pull you into the spell that he's casting. They've got flaws throughout, but I'm happy to have flaws throughout a movie when you have a director who's making exactly the type of movie that he wants to make and knows exactly what he's wanting to do.
Yeah.
And that's why the lulls that these movies have are absolutely 100% forgivable. because he is firing on all cylinders. He's doing exactly what he wants, and you can tell that he is having a ball with it. The Serpent and the Rainbow seems like it would be kind of apart from all the films, and given the third act has a lot of weirdness that's going on with it because the studio wanted him to make it more like his other movies, but he's playing with a whole bunch of elements. It's based on a book that a guy wrote that gets deep into real voodoo and zombies and Haitian culture. Zombies being people who are basically given a type of drug that makes them appear, for all intents and purposes, as if they're dead. And then they come to after a period of time and have no real memory. And they're kind of in a zombie-like state. And it deals with Bill Pullman's character going to Haiti, kind of looking into these events because a friend of his, I don't know if he I don't know the whole history off the top of my head, if he was like an old professor of his or what, but the guy Michael Gough, who played Alfred in all of the main Batman movies from the 80s and 90s, is working in conjunction with this pharmaceutical company, and they want Bill Pullman to go and find out if these effects of this drug can bring people back from the dead. Can it be used in any type of way that they can turn into a drug and make for profit, basically? And when he goes down to Haiti, he ends up getting pulled into this giant web of corruption and voodoo priests and possible coups in the government. And while it follows the book for the most part, there's lots of things that are made up, characters in the movie that are allegories for actual dictators that existed for a period of time in Haiti. So there's really big subjects that he's getting into, but he still is giving it that Wes Craven weirdness. You've got several hallucination scenes, but it's lots of fun. It works really well. He gets into a real type of terror and gets under your skin with the fact that the plausibility of lots of things that are going on in the movie. Somebody not being able to trust what they're seeing or their mind, being an outsider who's trying to get steeped into a new type of culture that they really don't understand, and being thrust into the middle of warring sides and not knowing who to trust or what to do in these situations. And it's well done. I mean, it's Bill Pullman, so you know you're going to love the performance that he gives. But there's so many great visuals throughout the movie, and just an inherent weirdness to all of it, that if you get a chance to see it, I definitely say check it out, because I've seen it maybe 2-3 times in the last 5 years, and each time I watch it, it grows on me a little bit more. Especially seeing it now was weird with the passing of Wes Craven last year, and the fact that the movie really ties into one's mortality. That takes on a different aspect watching it now. So it's interesting. Give it a watch. It's weird. It's fun. It's really creepy at parts. The Shocker, is that the other one you want to talk about?
Yeah, really briefly. We're running a little long. Okay. So
no, it's okay. Shocker is stupid fun.
It's so fun. It's such a fun movie.
That's all I say. It's stupid. It's fun. It's over the top. If they changed Horace Pinker a little bit, it would have been an amazing mid-sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street. Because of the things that Horace Pinker's able to do, and the fact that dream walking and dream control plays a big part in the film. just watch it. It's Mitch
Yeah.
Pileggi is having tons of fun. As much as I dislike Peter Berg, the director, he's stupid but so entertaining in the movie. It's got a fantastic late 80s metal soundtrack to it, and it's what you could tell that Wes Craven's like, I want to make a movie that's a comedy but still tapping into the things that I always have to do.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's so much.
A lot of his movies feel like that. It does feel like, he's found himself kind of pigeonholed into a certain genre, but he wants to explore these other things. And I think The People Under the Stairs is a really good example of that, because this is a movie that's talking about gentrification, and I think it was called like an affirmative action horror movie. And
yes,
I think this is my favorite of Wes Craven's movies. I really do.
It's so good.
I love it so much, and it is everything you've said about these other two films. It is ridiculous. It is over the top. But it is him exploring this very serious topic, but in a Wes Craven-y kind of way. Like to do this whole idea of landlords and race relationships and this power dynamic, but to do it in this movie where there are these people living in the walls and living in the basement, and have those be our actual good guys.
Yes.
It's such a Wes Craven thing to do, and it's so wonderful. The character of Fool is just, I love him so much. He's perfect, and I love, like, he's a realized character, and he grows over the course of this film, but in a very entertaining and fun and funny kind of way. I don't find this movie particularly scary.
No.
There's not even, there's a few tense moments, but it's more just silly, horror-y fun. It's so good.
Well, it's tense because you don't exactly know what to make about
anything.
Well, I was going to say Father when he's running around with his shotgun in the leather S&M outfit, which he doesn't need to wear, because 2 seconds earlier he's fine murdering people just in his overalls, basically.
They never
he's
really
like,
explain.
No, he's down in the basement slicing somebody up while eating them, and then the next scene he's like, oh crap, even though I was just yelling at the people who live or who are trapped in the walls and I was feeding them, I now have to try to find the one that's escaped, but first let me put on my leather outfit.
And it is interesting that, in a lot of other Wes Craven movies, the bad guys have been the traditional ones that you would expect. Freddy's a pedophile. The Last House on the Left guys are murderers and convicts. But in this movie, he made the bad guys be just the upper middle class looking white landlords. And I think that's very interesting, and it's him exploring something else, and I think it's great.
Possibly incestuous brother and sister.
Yeah. I love the brother. I love the brother and sister reveal. That's just so perfect. Wait, brother and sister?
Yeah. No, that's what I love in the movie, is that everything's going and has this weirdness, and then at like the 2/3 mark, they pull out so that they can reveal the Bill Cobbs character to be like, yeah, I'm here to give you some exposition, but it's totally okay because I'm Bill Cobbs and I'm always great in everything that I'm in. I love Bill Cobbs.
Yeah, he's really great.
He's very much that guy, and lots of people who don't know who he is, but he's Bill Cobbs. If you don't know who Bill Cobbs is,
come on,
shame on you. You need to go watch any movie that Bill Cobbs is in, because he's absolutely fantastic. Just in everything. But everybody is good in this movie. Fool is great because he does fit that early 90s wide-eyed young kid type character that did come fully formed with a backstory, of where they were at, why they were rebellious, why they had the views that they were, and how they grow as a person. And I mean, it's great that they have him in this because it kind of makes the movie in a weird way and like an urban Home Alone at parts. But
yeah.
if Kevin was trapped in the Wet Bandit's house, it's kind of the way to look at it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love that Craven is not afraid to explore these things. I mean, I think Fool is a great character because he's right on the cusp of manhood, so he's kind of young enough to where he can still be innocent, but old enough to at least process and understand these things he's learning about the world through this whole scenario. It's so great. I love this movie.
It also has one of the great coming of age aspects of movies in that time, where you have a character who says that they're wiser or older than they are, you know, that, oh, I am a man, I am an adult, and everybody's saying, well, then you need to prove it. And throughout the course of the film, they have to take those steps to finally achieve adulthood. And I mean, it's horrible that Fool has to go through this series of trials and tribulations to be able to do it, but he very much comes out succeeding in the end.
Or as Leroy put it, 13th birthday is unlucky anyway. Too old to get tit, too young to get ass. Ving Rhames was perfect in
thank
this
you,
movie.
Ving Rhames. He's so great.
I burst out laughing every time I hear that line.
Ving Rhames is great because he's Ving Rhames in every movie.
Yeah.
There's very slight
just
differences.
Ving Rhames.
Yeah. It's just Ving Rhames in a movie, and the only difference between one Ving Rhames and the other is what his general motivation is. Am I trying to get money in this movie? Am I trying to back up my friend? Am I trying to kill someone? That's basically it. Just slight little motivation, and that's really it.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to what we'll call late Craven. Moving into when I think he starts really examining his legacy and impact and what he's done from a meta level. And I don't want to spend too much time on New Nightmare.
No, but we can rope it easily into Scream.
Yeah, because it feels like the precursor. It feels like he's starting to explore these areas, and then he's testing the waters a little bit to this meta exploration of horror movies and of his own films, and then he jumps into it fully formed within Scream. New Nightmare, if you haven't seen it, this is a movie in which the actress who plays the main character in Nightmare on Elm Street is playing herself, and Freddy comes out into the real world, aka our world, where I believe we see there's a scene where Wes Craven is writing a scene that is being shown in the movie, which is just like... He was doing meta before it was really cool to do meta, and he does it in, this is a classic Craven, and he does it in this fun, goofy way in the middle of this horror movie. But New Nightmare, it's a good movie. Like, it's not great. It's certainly not my favorite Elm Street film, but it's good. And I think I'm glad it existed because I will get to Scream, but I really do enjoy Scream, and I don't think it would have existed without him kind of probing this concept in New Nightmare.
Yeah. I know this is going to sound like a bad hot take to people, but I like New Nightmare more than Scream, I think. And Scream is incredibly important for where horror was in the 90s and what it has to say about movies that came before it and where horror was going as a genre. But New Nightmare is kind of the end of that Craven feeling. Scream, when it comes to Scream and it comes to the humor that's in Scream, that's very much Kevin Williamson. And it doesn't have a lot of the tropes that Wes Craven is going through for the majority of his career. New Nightmare taps into that goofiness, that inherent and weird goofiness to it, but also digging into that darkness underneath and going into the nightmare side, but then he's having more fun with it. The fact that New Nightmare, the last act And I guess you can kind of say that the movie has 4 acts, but the fourth act of the movie takes place in the film. Like, it turns the movie that was going on where they were getting ready to make another nightmare film, and it all of a sudden flips a switch and it exists in that film world. And it's a ridiculous and daring but so great idea to just go hog wild in. And it's because Wes Craven wanted to try something new that he's going, okay, let's take this to the extreme hilt. What's the craziest thing that we can do? Oh, all of a sudden Nancy or all of a sudden Heather Langenkamp becomes Nancy and is in the movie that's taking place. And that's not something that Wes Craven in the Scream movies would be willing to do.
See, I completely agree with you, but I also I don't agree that Scream doesn't match up to what Craven's been doing. I think Scream is a very, very goofy film. And I think it almost to an effect where it I watched it yesterday and it feels kind of dated. I mean, it's very 90s. Like, it's very 90s angst, like rebellious teen. But it's also like it's a really goofy movie. I mean, just the entire Dewey character, that's Wes Craven. Like, that is that. I love, like, some of the comedy is a little more subtle, like the way that the Ghostface gets the shit kicked out of him throughout this movie, and like it fully the camera sits on it and lets you see every time he gets hit, like you hear him grunt and fall over, and like this guy's getting his ass kicked throughout this movie, and it's made me laugh. Like, it's really funny. It feels like a Craven movie to me. I mean, I agree that it's moving in a different kind of direction. I think he's being much more introspective on what these movies are. And I mean, that's written right into the film itself. So I mean, it's not very subtextual. It's literally the text of the film. But it feels like a Wes Craven movie to me.
I mean, it does have elements of Wes Craven, but I still feel like lots of the humor that's throughout it is very much Kevin Williamson because of how 90s it is. You know, it speaks in a very set way. The types of comedy that it's trying to get. Part of the reason that it's dated is because it was trying to tap into the zeitgeist of the 90s and that kind of laconic in a way, and, you know, I guess stoner and dweeby type of humor that it very much has, but also the nerdiness that's in it is a different type. It's a very specific type of jokey. It's very much wanting to be kind of a cool type of jokiness, you know. With this movie and then Scream 2, you're very much in that Tarantino period of time, and people are trying to get across how they think Tarantino would have characters talk and conversation, and trying to punch up different types of bits of humor and everything. And it exists in a time where the meta-ness is different, and the meta-ness of New Nightmare, you have it not only commenting on the movies itself, but then it slowly, like we said, becomes the movie proper that's taking place. And in this, it's more so making comments and jokes on the genre itself, as opposed to filmmaking in general.
Yeah, but it's not even comments and jokes. I really think it's an exploration. I mean, having your main characters be obsessed with the exact kind of movies that Craven's been making his entire life is him kind of exploring, to me, what his impact on the world has been. And I don't want to get too serious about it because this is still a very goofy movie, but I mean, like, there's literally a time when one of the characters tells the two bad guys that you guys have been watching too many movies. And to me, that's fascinating because it's coming from a guy who has been instrumental in creating this landscape. And the biggest irony of Scream, to me, is that a movie that's exploring and poking fun at all these movies became itself an instrumental movie to defining a horror landscape for the next. God, we're still kind of living in it.
Well, but that's the majority of movies, and maybe that speaks to Wes Craven's ability overall. That so many of his films end up coming back around, and making statements that still work and still resonate today. People Under the Stairs, and what it says about gentrification and class structure, and race structure as well, are still very much prevalent today, especially in the last couple of years. And then elements of Serpent of the Rainbow, and people from outside coming into a third world structure and not really understanding the culture, and butting heads when they think that they're there to do the right things, but they're getting in over the head and they're causing many problems. It's still something that's very, very paramount today as well.
Yeah. That's very true. And I will say that as much as I love Scream, I think that Scream joke wore thin very, very quickly. I think Scream 2 is an okay movie. And then at some point you're like, okay, we get it. Like, now you're talking about the trilogy. And then in the fourth one, there's this whole it's almost like poking fun at reboot culture. And I get it. It's just like, I get it, and
he's so tired as a filmmaker when they get to 4. Like you can tell he doesn't. He doesn't want to be making it.
Why did he do it? Like that's what I don't understand. Like he showed no hesitation in walking away from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Of course, he eventually came back, but he was involved in every single one of these movies. And I believe
because he wants to try. I think it was to make up for walking away from the Nightmare series when he did, and the space and time that occurs between each of the Scream films, that the horror landscape was constantly changing so much, as well as film in general, and the way that movies that were being made, the language that they were being made in, the advances of technology. So you think that maybe he wanted to make Scream 4 to try to revisit that well and see what they could do nowadays, with cameras being the size that they were, with cell phone technology and everything, trying to play up with that. How would something like this exist today? And it was just kind of, he probably felt deflated by that.
And I think that's true. I think 11 years between Scream 3 and Scream 4, there's ample things within the horror film landscape to poke fun at and to explore. And I think maybe it's one of those things where it sounded a lot more interesting on paper, and then when you start executing it, it's like, this isn't really working. And I think maybe that's what just happened in that movie.
And I don't mean to poke your buttons on it, so I apologize. Just know that I'm using this person as a perfect example, because it's true, regardless of what you think about them. It's something that happened in their career, is with each of the Scream films. By the time you get to the third Scream and then you're jumping to the fourth Scream, what everybody knows is when it comes to the killer is going to be a big twist. So you have to have that be a twist, and you have to try to find a way. And so that's what I'm thinking. Somebody like M. Night Shyamalan, who was very much stuck into that. Oh, no. But I'm saying he... For the first couple of his movies had a twist, so it was expected in his middle set of films of, okay, there has to be the twist. Where's the twist? And when you get to Scream 3 and Scream 4, you've had the first two movies play up the twist being big things. So people are sitting there in 3 and 4 going, okay, what's the twist? Is this person the killer? Is this person the killer? And that takes you out of the movie as a whole. So when you get to number 4, and they bring it back around the way that it does, that's how you know that he and the writer are completely deflated by it. They're exhausted, and they go, okay, we're just recreating what we already did in another movie, and we're going to have the characters mention the fact that there's not really any creativity, so you just have to do a new twist on something that you already did.
Right, like at some point,
And that's
you're
yeah.
not being meta, and you're just admitting that it's poor writing. Like,
Yeah, and you're just like, listen, this is us giving up right here. We don't know what you want, so we're just going to give you a twist on it. And
Yeah.
aren't we being clever? No,
Yeah.
we're really sorry. We don't know why we did this.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that Scream 4 ended up being, his last film to direct, which is kind of why I want to talk before we wrap up here. I want to talk about his second to last film, My Soul to Take,
Yes.
because I think it's an infinitely more interesting and infinitely more Craven-y movie than Scream 4 is.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people haven't seen this movie. It did not do very well. It was critically panned.
Yep.
It is not a good movie. I want to make that
No.
very clear before I talk lovingly about it for the next 10 minutes. But I adore this movie, and I think it's for every. I wish I could just call this Craven's final movie, because I think this is
Yes.
the perfect Wes Craven sign off. Because this is, I think, everything that he did throughout his entire career, kind of coming together, and it sadly is just shy of working for many reasons. But there's so many good Wes Craven pieces in it that just make me love it. There's so many interesting ideas and explorations in this film that it just doesn't quite come together the way it should. It's so close too. Like, you can see if they had just spent a little more time on this and just fleshed this little part out a little more, that this thing could have really been something great. But it's not. But
you know what makes the movie great to me?
what's that?
The end credits. Because as the end credits play, of course they have to get, the normal basic first 30 seconds or so of credits out of the way. And then for the rest of the end credits, they are showing storyboards on the left and right hand side of the screen that's scrolling, so that you can see that everything that's in the movie isn't necessarily just an editing thing, but how they exactly wanted it to be. So any of the weird scenes that you're like, but this doesn't really flow with this, that's how the movie was storyboarded. What you see on the screen is what they were coming up with in the storyboards that they had for, okay, this is how everything's going to transition to this and this. And while the movie doesn't work and it is a bad film, it gains an extra point or point and a half for being this crazy, and them sticking to their guns and them saying, nope, this is the vision that we have. This is the crazy idea and the crazy way we want to go with this movie, and we're not backing down from it.
It's so crazy. None of these teenagers act like teenagers at any point in this film. Not a single one of them. It's so crazy. And I guess you could argue that that's intentional, because they have the soul of a multiple personality murderer. But God, it's so weird. Like, it doesn't feel like the real world at any point. And I mean,
the high school doesn't make any sense with the whole Fang and the way she rules the school from the bathroom.
But I kind of love that it never explains any of that. Like, it's just like, it's this little, and it doesn't really matter in the context of the film. Like, it's just a little part they added in. It's like, but it's world building, but it doesn't. It's fake world building. Like, you could argue that this entire movie was just a dream, and it was just inside the head of the killer, as his different personalities battled. Like, what was that terrible movie that literally did that? Oh crap, I can't remember. Were they all
Identity?
Well, they're all stuck at a hotel. Is that what it was? We were all stuck at a hotel, and they realized they're all...
Identity with John Cusack.
God, that was a bad movie too.
And it turns out that it's Pruitt Taylor Vince.
Okay, there we go.
He's the killer.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's such a weird film.
But it's so great because it touches on so many different little Wes Craven hallmarks.
Yeah.
Like when they find the body that's been washed up and is dead on the rocks, and Frank Grillo is talking to the EMT. It just starts talking about what would your aunt say, and talking about the aunt being into voodoo. and a whole bunch of other stuff, and you're just like, wait, what? Like just casually in conversation, what would she just bringing up voodoo in the middle of a conversation and using it against somebody for questioning what's going on with a murder just feels completely out of place, but so wonderful.
Well, and the crazy thing too, the entire opening scene of the film is kind of filmed and like acted as if it was the conclusion to a movie.
Yes.
In that nothing is explained to us at all, and like, but it's played as if this is supposed to be some grand reveal, and like we're supposed to know who all these characters are, like we're supposed to know who Frank Grillo is at this point, but we don't, and it's like it's just this crazy like beginning of a film as end of film where the serial killer just refuses to die, and to like a comical extent. Like this guy gets up from death like 6 times.
6 times, or maybe 7.
Maybe
to go
there you
with
go.
all the personality. but you've got Harris Yulin at the beginning of the movie as the psychiatrist who gets to be in the movie for like 5 minutes just so he can die.
Right, and it almost feels like that. Yeah, like there's another movie that happened right before this started that all these characters were in, and they were all dealing with all this stuff, but it's just there. And I think that's absolutely intentional. I think they was filmed that way very much on purpose.
Yeah.
I don't like. Oh, there's so many parts in this that don't make, like when he starts just randomly imitating the
Going
other
into all the other characters.
Yeah, that's so weird. It
happens like 4 or 5 times too. The scene just stops so he can do impressions of all the other characters, even though he technically hasn't absorbed the soul.
Right.
Of the person who's been killed yet.
It doesn't even make sense within the context of the world they've created, but it doesn't matter. Like, I love that the movie waits until the 45 to 50 minute mark to reveal that Fang is Bug's sister. And it's just like there's hints in there like when she's doling out punishments, which is the weirdest thing in the world. Give him a 3. It's so weird. Yeah, it's so weird. But God, it's
he seems to hit them the same too.
Yeah,
when
he does.
This is the 3, and punches him in the shoulder, and Bug's like, "Ow!" And then he gut punches the other kid as an 8. It's just like, I don't exactly understand like what happens. But he's not allowed to instigate anything with anybody else.
No, that's strictly prohibited.
So when he tries to fight back in the Condor scene, shouldn't Fang have like gone mad at him and sent somebody else to come and deliver like a 4 or 5?
She thought the Condor had things handled. The Condor part is like, I swear to God, Wes Craven probably just like saw a documentary about the California condor one evening and was like, I need to work this into one of my movies.
It's probably the one that's playing in the background when he's in the bathroom.
But that's, I love, like, this is really bad movie, but I love it. I absolutely love it. And every time I see this movie on, I end up watching it just for the weirdness. This is a movie that I will never say it works, but like because it just doesn't. But it really is just so close to being something good.
But it doesn't care. That I respect that about the movie.
Right.
It knows that it's got so many elements that it's juggling in the air, and most of them may not connect, but you keep watching because in a moment or two it's going to completely shift tone or direction, and there's going to be something weird or stupid or ridiculous that happens that pulls you back in, and you're like, okay, yeah, let's do it. I don't know why this is happening at all, but sure, let's go for it.
Yep.
Let's have a girl randomly take the really, really long ass way to school while she's talking to God, but then also have her talk to the Ripper. And for somebody who's praying to God the whole time, she's totally ready to just have herself be killed.
Yeah.
She's like, God, I need you to protect me, but if that's not your plan, okay, come get me, Ripper.
Yeah,
it's totally fine.
Craven was raised Baptist, so and obviously went away from that so it doesn't surprise me that his depiction of the religious character is not very nuanced.
Just yelling about Jehovah.
Yeah. But at the same time, like it's almost as if each character has a personality trait, and they are one note that trait and don't stray at all. Like none of these are real. Like just like The Last House on the Left, and The Hills Have Eyes. None of these are real characters. They're just like they have one archetypal trait, and they stick to that no matter what. And
well, for some of the people in the movie, I like how they double down on things. Like the religious girl, she's not just like super crazy religious; she's also a ginger, so she's doubly sticking out. The African American male, your African American male character, of which there's only one of in this movie, but in a nice weird change of pace, you have two female African American characters in the movie, but your one male African American character is also blind.
Yeah.
Just because Jerome is just blind because.
Yeah.
There's never any explanation as to why he has to be blind.
And it's only, and he doesn't seem very blind in the film. Like
no.
the part when they're running through the woods, and I'm like, that guy's blind.
Exactly. Well, not only that, but he's also climbing around in that house perfectly fine for a blind guy. Bug, I want to let you know that when you're not at home, I come through and I walk through your house just so I can make sure to do it without my cane, so that I don't annoy anybody in case there happens to be a killer around and I have to climb on the roof of the house through your window so I can hide in your closet.
Yep. What a weird movie. I love it so much. And that's Wes Craven. You know, I really enjoyed getting to walk through each of these films and watching them in such quick succession. Really felt like I kind of understood him as a filmmaker as I went through. I do, you know, he I think, wasn't he called like the Master of Fear or something like that?
Yeah, he was called the Master of Fear, Master of Horror, Master of Terror at different points in his career.
Do you think that frustrated him? Because I mean, I don't, like, for most of his movies, the fear portion and the scare factor is not really what he's trying to do. He's just kind of using it as a means to an end to say or do something else. So if it were me, I feel like that would frustrate me.
I don't think he took an issue with it. I think he was fine with whatever would help him get backing for another movie.
That's true, yeah.
And if it meant kind of playing up to that side and interviews and stuff, then sure. I know that we didn't really get to talk about it and we don't need to spend much time on it. But he did go for the schlock as much as he could and had fun with it. Because of Red Eye. I know that we don't really have time to talk about it, but and Red Eye is a very slight film. It's not a great film, but
it's a good 3/4 of a movie.
Exactly, and it's an experiment with him to do a different sort of film that's mostly set in one location. But he does play up that B movie schlockiness throughout it with just little odd touches, the way dialogue flows, and he embraced that side, and he was able to make a career out of, for the most part, making movies that he wanted to make. And
which is great.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of directors who were fine with that little corner that they kind of carved out for themselves. You have a lot of directors who, regardless of the background that they start out in, when they get that clout, they want to move out of it and make bigger and bigger pictures, more prestigious films to kind of make their mark that way by having a giant blockbuster or a movie that wins a lot of Academy Awards. And he was really lucky that he didn't necessarily have to do that.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think he's a great director. I think it's really interesting seeing him form from a very, you know, he didn't have a lot of skill at the beginning. I do not think The Last House on the Left is a well-directed movie at all. But he learns and he grows and he becomes better at his craft. And I know his final films weren't great, but they are Wes Craven, and I think that's wonderful.
It's a testament to his career that the majority of the movies that he made throughout the 80s and 90s have gotten special collector's edition reissues through Scream Factory that are chock full of special features that they went back and, for the most part, restored and cleaned up the movies. And you don't really do that for movie releases if the director or the movie that they made wasn't respected or well done.
And so many of his films have been rebooted too, which, I mean, the reboots have not been good films, but I mean, the fact that they're so iconic and memorable enough that people think that they can make money off rebooting these properties is how long before we get a rebooted Scream? I think within a decade it's going to happen.
Even though I haven't seen it, I mean, they did have it's not directly connected to the series, but they do have the Scream TV series that they put out recently.
Yeah, I watched the first season of that. The second season kind of lost me, but the first season was interesting. My favorite part was when the first episode they make fun of the idea of doing a horror show as a serialized TV show, because it's a terrible idea. And they say right in the show, it's like, that wouldn't make any sense. How would you have any suspense that would carry over week from week? And then they kind of did it. So, yeah, I don't know. The second, I didn't think it was very good, but
that's not Wes Craven's fault. So
no, definitely not. So yeah, that's Wes Craven. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed. I really like doing these director deep dives because I think you learn about filmmaking and you learn about filmmakers, and you get to see some movies that you hadn't seen in a long time or hadn't seen at all in some cases. So I definitely need to go back and fill in my Craven filmography gaps.
Yep, Serpent in the Rainbow. Go grab it.
Will do. All right, so before we wrap up, I just wanted to very quickly do some recommendations or some what we've been watching. We haven't done this in a few weeks. So, Adrian, what have you been consuming in the entertainment industry?
Mostly, it's been horror. Going over horror films that I love. I haven't seen a ton of new films. I was trying to remember. I did go to a screening a couple weeks back, but the movie was just so-so. What I will tell everybody about, and because it's being wider and wider released, is Greasy Strangler is showing up in a whole bunch of towns. Go see it in the theater. Take several friends to go see it with you, because that's the best way to experience the film, is in a theater with a ton of people. Maybe slightly intoxicated. Yeah, you have a couple drinks, to make it more entertaining. But the audience aspect to it is you want to have that shared experience. Absolutely. At the same time, if you have a well-respected or kind of bigger art house theater, possibly also an Alamo, just depends on the city you're in. The Handmaiden is coming to a whole bunch of cities. It's an astounding film. It's really, really good. I know that Amazon's going to be getting it on Amazon Prime sometime in the next couple months, but they haven't given an official release date of that yet. So if it comes through your town, definitely go see The Handmaiden. Yeah. I strongly agree with both those recommendations. I saw both those films and they are excellent. I have not been to the theater since Fantastic Fest still. Which is crazy. My weekends have just been so busy, and there just hasn't been very, very many good films coming out. We're in November now, so I think this weekend we're starting to get some movies, so I'll be going back to the theater. But it just hasn't happened. But I have been watching a lot of TV, and the thing that I've been watching that I want to talk about is the new season of Black Mirror. This is Charlie Brooker's dystopian future technology series that was a 2 BBC series of 3 episodes each. Netflix ordered 12 total, and we have 6 of them now, so 6 new episodes. I love this show so much. I think the first series, the first 3 episodes, are probably the strongest in my opinion still
But there are some within this third season that I just absolutely loved. It's not the type of show that's going to make you feel good watching. You're probably going to be a little depressed after the end of each episode, but it's so well made, and I love this central premise of using technology to show the worst in human beings, and it's really good, really good.
Yeah, and we'll tell everybody 2 words: San Junipero.
Oh my god, that episode.
That's the one that if people want to take part in the conversation that everybody's having about the show, that's the one to watch, because that's the one that's fostering lots of conversation. The great thing about the show is they're very much in the vein of like The Outer Limits or Twilight Zone, so they're not directly connected. You don't have to worry about jumping into the 3rd episode of the 3rd season, and it's not an issue. So San Junipero, definitely watch that one. I've only seen 2 out of the episodes, and that was the one that I saw. The other one that I saw was the one that's got Bryce Dallas Howard.
The social media one, yeah.
Yeah, and for anybody that's a big fan of Parks and Rec, definitely check the episode out, because it is written by, I'm going to forget his name, but the guy who created Parks and Rec and Rashida Jones.
Yeah. That one...
It very much has that feel to it.
That was a good episode. I think the best episodes of Black Mirror are the ones where the show is ahead of me, where I legitimately don't know where it's going to go. And that's an episode where you could very clearly see from the beginning exactly where this was going to go. Not that ride wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah.
It just wasn't surprising.
But it's the performance. Her performance is... It's great. Absolutely.
Bryce Dallas Howard is really good.
Oh, I remembered what movie we went to a screening of last week. Inferno. But
you don't have to bring that up.
Yeah, but don't go see it. Unless for some reason your dad really wants a movie to go see. I'd still tell anyone's dad, don't go see it. Wait for it to show up on HBO next year.
All right. And with that is it for us this week. Opening in theaters this weekend is Doctor Strange. Marvel's newest movie is coming out. Also Trolls and Hacksaw Ridge, which is the Mel Gibson, Andrew Garfield pacifist in war movie. I'm excited about Doctor Strange, cautiously optimistic about Hacksaw Ridge. And you could not pay me money to go see Trolls. Although it has a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I don't know what to do with that.
It's that Justin Timberlake bump.
Yeah. I think it's one of those movies where critics are probably like, it's for kids, whatever. It's not unbearable to watch, so we'll give it a positive Rotten Tomatoes score.
It's a how much did your child squirm during the movie? If they paid attention and they didn't scream much, then you give it a good review.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so that's it for us this week. Next week, hopefully Matt will be back with us. I'm not sure quite what we're doing then. I think we're going to try to do a bonus episode sometime next week to talk about Doctor Strange in detail. Adrian, if you're seeing it this weekend, you will be, of course, invited to participate in that.
I've got my tickets for Thursday.
Nice, me too. All right, but so we'll get out of here before we do. Adrian, where can you be found on the interwebs?
I can be found at Yo Adrian Tours.
And that's on Twitter, right?
Yes, on Twitter.
All right. I am also on Twitter at ScottDaly85. That's DALY. You can also find out more news about this podcast, every other podcast we do, and all of our writing on Twitter at Daily Planet Films or online at dailyplanetfilms.com. You could also take a moment and, if you're listening to this on iTunes or on Stitcher, if you could subscribe and rate us and comment, do whatever you need to do, share, that'd be wonderful. And if you want to jump on over to our Patreon page and support us on Patreon, that would be great too. Adrian, thanks so much for filling in here this week. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
It was a lot of fun.
No, absolutely. I had a great time doing this.
Yeah, it was really great. And for the rest of you out there, we will see you next week.
The podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, go away.